Welcome back to our collector deep dive into IWC. So we've already covered part one where we looked into the Blümlein era, and this is part two. So as we said in the previous video, we're breaking down IWC into 3 chapters based on neo-vintage and modern pieces. And we're doing that by the CEO tenure. And this part is going to be the Georges Kern era. And I think this is a really important chat because for me, I look at IWC and I think it's going from a utilitarian, specific kind of watch for a specific kind of collector to a more mainstream offering. And Georges Kern's been tasked with that job.
Yeah, he's like, how do we turn this quite niche thing? Blümlein made it into something. Kern blew it up. Kern was the master marketer. He fundamentally understands the watch market. I mean, he's still going strong today, right? He gets it. He took IWC and he took it worldwide. He took it global. No doubt about that.
So in our first video, we talked about the Blümlein era, 1980 to around 2000, 2001. So let's frame this conversation. So in 2000, IWC is acquired by Richemont. In 2001, sadly, Blümlein passes away, and then Georges Kern takes over the brand in 2002. Now, the very same year, something gets launched at IWC, which I would say it's not an understatement to say changed the brand forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the watch.
The watch.
It's the watch. John Mayer would agree. It's the watch of IWC.
The big pilot.
The 5002.
Huge release.
Huge watch.
In every way. Quite literally.
But yeah, you're right. Is it fair to attribute this to Kern? Maybe not. In the Blümlein, there's no way, had nothing to do with it. It came out within, I think, 6 months of him passing away, something like that. But this is the watch that forevermore IWC will be known for. 46.2 millimeters, based on the original pilot's watch that they'd wear, aviators would wear over their shearling jackets, in the massive strap. I think the original ones are like 51 mil. So they reduced it a little bit.
Yes.
These things are, and even the strap on it, it's like a bull leather with 2 rivets either side. Absolutely iconic bit of design. The big onion crown, the triangle at the top.
Yep.
And that in itself is IWC, right? The triangle, the crown, and the rivets. Come on.
It's such a tool watch in that sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I do agree with you. I think the likelihood is that watch was already in development when Georges Kern took over. But I do think that he should be credited with successfully marketing that watch because, that became a phenomenon. And I would say most well-known celebrities were at some point in time during the 2000s photographed or filmed wearing a big pilot.
Crazy. Like I a couple, maybe a year or two ago, just did a bit of research into this. I bought, so the long story is, I watched in 2013 John Mayer talking about, it's a Talking Watches with Hodinkee, and he described the 5002 as, it's just me and my watch, it goes on the nightstand and I see it and it's just that, it's like a deep emotional connection. I know, I was pretty young at the time, but I was like, one day I'm going to have one of those. And it felt so pure. It felt so, I don't know. Yeah, pure is the best word I can use for it when it comes to IWC. And Gossip Girl was big, in like the 2000s, and it was there. Every late night talk show, the guy was wearing it. Michael Jordan's wearing the platinum version. John Mayer is quite literally stunting on Kanye West with his platinum big pilot watch. It had the cultural zeitgeist at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that scene with John Mayer and Kanye, it's a graduation promo, like schooling people on what IWC was, like it's this big utilitarian watch in platinum. It's worth a bunch of cash, but you wouldn't know it, right? And I think at that time, people weren't even that familiar with IWC.
No. Well, I don't think at this time they were... They were still pure. Right? I don't think they were trying to market themselves as something they weren't. Not that I think they do that later on, but it becomes a much more commercially driven engine. I think it quadruples or even more its revenue in that era. That is wildly impressive.
Yeah.
And Georges Kern, you cannot take away from that man. he is a business machine. He is a marketing machine. But this very early 5002 is a perfect blend of Blümlein and Kern. They meet at a perfect time.
You're right. It's a nice synergy. But also, I think when you look at a IWC pilot's watch, it is utilitarian, right? So how do you make a watch like that attract people's attention? Making it big is the way you do it. And it worked so well. Like you said, it was so identifiable, and you just see everyone wearing them during that time.
Yeah, I think John Mayer said I could read the time on the stage still. I think Ed Sheeran, he has a big pilot, said the same thing. I just like that it's legible. And those things are crazy legible. I have really small wrists, so when I had my big pilot on, it looked like a plate. But you always know the time. You always know the time. And you saw it. If you could see a picture of someone in the press, really easy to know what they're all wearing.
That's a really good point. So identifiable. Yeah. Not just the case size at 46.2 millimeters, but that diamond crown. It was like you could see it from the other side of the room.
It's so true. You knew it, didn't you? And even the later iterations, you got the 5002 into the 004. And then you kind of get a lot of collaborations over the years. Or collaborations is probably not the right word. Unique pieces along the way. There's a tribute, the Safari tribute. There's, the Muhammad Ali version. There's quite a few variations of it. But up until a certain point, it stayed quite pure. And you still have, the TypeScript. It's got that original World War II TypeScript, which it doesn't actually have anymore. It's my one wish that IWC would bring that back, because it's so, again, utilitarian. They've not quite softened up their design language yet.
Well, I like the fact that when they first released the 5002, rather than at that time making, gold versions of it, polishing it, they just did it in platinum.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a very subtle way of turning that into a real luxury piece,
Yeah, I'd agree.
And I love that. But I suppose over time, the big pilot, it evolved a lot and changed.
Yes. And I think tastes have changed, right? I don't think people are, at that era, AP starts to go big here. You get the offshore, it's a real product of its era. And over the course of Kern's tenure, we probably did have quite a big love for big watches. But I don't imagine the big pilot sells as well these days, the 46mm version, because we've seen the 43.
Yes.
We'll talk about that under Chris. But Mr. Kern, what is he known for? It's got to be that, fine, which we'll share the collab. But if I was collecting Georges Kern era, has to be partnerships. And two things that come to mind. AMG, Mercedes AMG, 2005-ish. That is so well received that I know loads of collectors that pretty much collect the watches that they see on the F1 drivers' wrists. Incredible collaboration. And of course, the Top Gun.
The Top Gun.
That's badass.
Yeah, not for me. Not for me. I'm always dubious of those kind of collaborations, and I see it with sort of special forces and pilots and those military collabs. To me, it feels like unless you're part of that whole world, to have that on a watch, it's. I understand why people would want to collect it, but for me, I don't really understand that.
That is my Top Gun. Sorry, on the train there that I paid for with my own dear money. And I'm not a Top Gun pilot, sadly. Would love to be. No, but, okay, fine. If we step back, if we talk about Kern as the man that blows IWC into the stratosphere and makes it super sticky as a brand, partnerships is a big part of that. Just being front and centre of F1, or at least just the AMG as a separate brand, I think it makes it very commercially sticky. And then on top of that, the Top Gun stuff, appearing in Top Gun 2 in the movies, again, that's under Chris Granger, but it's Kern that establishes that. It's Kern that does the first Top Gun watch, the all-black Top Gun watch, and it's a hit. I again have no idea what the sales volume's like, but I know a lot of people who collect IWC have a Top Gun watch. Maybe that's to do with the ceramics, maybe it's to do with the colours, but whether I know it's not for you, but there is something in there that if people feel an affinity to Mercedes, or they feel an affinity to pilots' watches, and the DNA, it makes sense, doesn't it? As a collaboration, it doesn't feel like they've sort of just reached for the best sponsor they can that will pay. I think it's very mutually beneficial on both parts. Like, engineering is at the heart of it.
Regardless of how you feel about those collaborations, there is no doubting the commercial success that comes from those collaborations, especially the Mercedes AMG Formula One collab. Like, how many people learned about IWC from that collab?
Again, not to steal from Chris, but you got the Kern sets the stage for what will become the F1 movie. Whatever your opinion is on that, it was a massive success. IWC being at F1, I would venture a bet and say it's probably one of the best strategic moves that could have ever been made at IWC. And without it, you would see a material drop-off in market share and brand awareness.
I agree. And regardless of whether you're looking at, Chris managing that relationship or Georges Kern, both of them did it very well. And they saw the value of collaborating with the drivers too.
Yeah,
Special editions. And Lewis Hamilton was always walking around with some kind of big pilot that like a one of one. It creates intrigue.
Of course.
Obviously, F1 drivers, celebrities, people want to know what they're wearing, what they're doing. To me, I just see that as such an important part of IWC's ascendancy.
Do you remember when F1 said, you can't wear jewelry on the track? And then Lewis Hamilton, I don't know whether IWC paid for this stunt, but if they did, brilliant. He came out and we just had like 4 massive IWC watches on. And like, he just took the fine. And even on the glove, right? You got okay, what's the watch on the glove of the F1 drivers?
The pilot.
It's the big pilot.
Yep.
It's the 5002. You know it immediately from the triangle and from the crown. You know what it is. That's the hero watch. But I think that almost sums up Kern.
Yep.
It's the hero watch, and he commercially blows into the stratosphere and understands fundamentally how to market and understands the hero product.
Yeah, he understood what was required on the mission.
And he delivered.
He did deliver, but it's worth saying that he had to look after IWC throughout some growing pains. And I have to commend him because I think taking that utilitarian brand for essentially watch nerds into the mainstream, almost fashionable company, you're going to upset a lot of people. And, we should talk about John Mayer's open letter to IWC in 2015 and the way that people started to criticize the brand for what they were doing. It's definitely worth touching on that.
Yeah.
Like, I think at that time when he wrote that letter, a lot of people had problems with IWC. People who were diehard watch collectors.
This would probably be more in your wheelhouse, in that this is around the era 2013 that I got into it. So when I remember reading the Hodinkee article, and you got to remember that he is like the OG watch influencer because you believe him. He is a collector. He's not some sort of paid, I've got no clue about watches, right? The guy goes so far as to show off he's got pretty much every early big pilot, and goes so far as in this letter say, IWC, you've lost your way. I hope we can find a way back to what you're great at, which is the shearling jackets, and the rivets and the sort of unapologetic design. They're quite big, punchy design. But I've never seen a modern IWC on his wrist or anything really after, mid 2000s to late 2000s. I've not seen him proudly wear, and he talks about his watches a lot. So I think that open letter maybe is a good stake in the ground of where it becomes, like you said, it goes from making watches for the purists to sure, but now we've got to be a commercial hit, sensational.
Expanding a watch brand's always going to upset some people, And I think that in that open letter, I agreed with a lot of what John Mayer was saying, but that's because I'm a watch fanatic. And in our last video talking about the Blümlein era, it got me excited because that was a time when it's for watch people, for like diehard nerds like me. But, Kern, obviously his mission statement was to take IWC to the mainstream and make it more appealing. And it's hard to argue with his success when you look at the numbers and just how IWC as a brand is like pushed into the mainstream and known by people.
It's so known. I think, genuinely, I would summarize Kern as the ultimate conduit for making IWC part of the mainstream conversation. Now, like, you can talk Rolex, you can talk Omega. IWC is in that same breath, and for as much as I love the Blümlein era, I don't know if Blümlein alone and if he'd have just left it at that, would have grown at the same pace. And the compromises in the Kern era, you got a lot of special editions, a lot of partnerships, love it or hate it, and maybe a slight move away from deeply technical progress, or moving on horology as his mission statement. And maybe his mission statement, like, as you just said, is growth. I mean, look at Breitling. He's doing the same thing now with collaborations. It was the NFL. Again, I'm not a Breitling collector, but that's a great move. The NFL is one of the most watched sports in the world. And if we're just talking strictly commercially and how to grow a brand, that's a great call.
I think horologically speaking, I agree with you. But I would say the 5,000 movements, which could have also been in development before Kern took over, that's a big thing. It's in-house.
It's in-house, yeah.
Yeah. Obviously not the same level of achievement as the Blümlein era, but still worth mentioning, definitely.
Yeah.
You know, like a big automatic movement with a 7-day power reserve. It's different. It's cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's super cool. And if you look at those movements, they'll pocket watch style, because you could, getting a big power reserve, it's not an easy feat in a small watch. No, I agree. I'm not trying to diminish his technical achievements, but I just don't think that the focus was the same, and that's fine. I think you're right in that, bringing things in-house. It's also part of the wider Richemont story here as well, is that you've now got all these resources and firepower under the brand that allowed him probably to start putting verticals into the brand.
So what about if you're a collector getting into IWC and you're looking at this era and you're like, I want to know what the right watch to buy is. Let's have it. What would you recommend?
What do you think? No, I look, because it's just our opinions, right? I'm trying to be objective and not just say what I would buy. But it has to be a 5002, both like the transitional and the original, with the the original fish crown. Oh, and the original typescript.
Yep.
We'll show you on some of the the original font. I wish they'd bring that back. Apparently it's a hard no. 5002, 5004. I'm probably buying the first Top Gun, the very first one. And I would probably buy something from the Mercedes collaborations. Not exactly sure which one. I'm not as into that. But they're probably the three that I would think of. But something in material science. Well, I think you've got that covered with the Top Gun.
Yep. Okay.
What about you?
Have to say 5002. Yes. Like if you're going to collect IWC, that's like
steel.
What I was about to say. If you're on a budget, buy the steel. If you've got heaps of cash, buy it in platinum.
I think they're going for about 20k now, which look, it's a crazy amount of money. But for a platinum, historically important IWC, really cool, interesting value proposition there.
Yeah, and I think to your point on them being reasonable value, same goes with the steel version, right? Like a 5002 in steel.
Yeah.
Like I've seen them for sale, sort of like £5,000-6,000. Like, okay, like there's a lot of money in any language, but for such a historical watch, in IWC's catalog, that to me is a great place to start.
There are worse places to put your money if you're looking for something that has gravitas. And I think objectively, no matter who you talk to that collects, okay, that's cool. It's just important. It's an important watch.
Indeed. The other thing I thought about was I was looking at the 150th anniversary IWC references, and there was a big pilot there which had a blue lacquered dial with an outsized date. And I think it's the first time they ever put an outsized date in a big pilot.
Really
and it ties into that kind of cockpit gauge theme of the big pilot. So that would be my other recommendation if you're looking for something a little bit more contemporary.
Is that the one, does that have the old typescript as well? Possibly.
I don't know if it does.
It does, okay.
It's just that the blue lacquered dial and the outsized date got me. It's a nice watch, that.
It is a very, very good watch. I didn't even think about that. No, that's a great, again, looking back at his era. Wait, so he left in 2017? Yeah. So you got the John, I wonder what the coincidence is that John Mayer comes out in 2015, all guns blazing. And by 2017, Kern's like, okay, fine, John, we'll move on.
But as John Mayer said in that video, just after they published that letter, the 75th anniversary Portuguesa came out, and it's like such a beautiful piece.
Very nice.
So, timing's a funny thing. But I think what's interesting about this era is we've just spent the whole time talking about one watch model line.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking, what about all of the other watches from IWC during that time?
I would bring in, right, the family model is him. The Portuguese are having these really clear, distinct families.
But the fact that we're not talking about them makes me think, like, what are they even important? Like, is it just the big pilot? Like, they brought in an aqua timer in 2014, which hasn't been popular at all.
No.
I would say the Portofino never gets talked about. No. And Portuguese, I personally really like, but once again, people don't really tend to talk about the Portuguese that much in collector conversations.
I think you make a really good point. So again, if we're just being fair to Kern, he does that. He puts these families in and says, hey, this is what we're about. I've asked IWC this quite a few times, just, in the boutique, and Apparently the Portuguese sells really well. I think might actually be the hero at the moment. Not sure. And then maybe every boutique's different. But I agree. I've got no particular excitement around... I like the Portuguese and I like the pilots, but really beyond that, I'm not overly thrilled. But one thing I do really like, in terms of complication, maybe it's the perfect hybrid of Kern and Blümlein, is the big pilot perpetual counters.
Yes.
That's going to be a hero for IWC. I think that's a really cool watch to own. You know, again, with the vial, with the dates in, they look cool. You get them in all the Top Gun colors or not, you know, however you think about it. You know, you can get tourbillons in a big pilot case. There is something about that that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I think some people will consider it sacrilege to be putting really high complications in this sort of utilitarian, ultimately legible watch.
Yeah.
But then I would also argue that what isn't more useful and utilitarian than a calendar that you don't have to change, that tells you the date, you know, without any manipulation of the movement at all.
Yeah.
And I think this might be slightly beyond the Kern era, but there's a Rodeo Drive version, black ceramic blue dial,
beautiful,
perpetual, love it.
Might be one of my favorite of the PPCs.
Very cool.
So Kern, what is kind of out there? What if we're looking at IWC now? We've gone Blümlein. I think we agree. Is master horologist.
Yes.
Meaningfully moves on the watch world. Passes away. He also sets the brand guidelines, right? I think he sets the DNA.
For sure.
Then we get Kern. I'm going to go with my opinion, is master marketer, understands how to and successfully delivers on the mandate, which is they get bought by Richemont. Richemont want that shareholder value to get pumped right up. And he does that. He delivers. He makes IWC an irrefutably popular core brand that everyone all of a sudden wants to own.
Yep, I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I think he understood the mission of the brand to make it more commercially viable, to grow the collector base, which he successfully did. But I would also say that perhaps for diehard IWC collectors, there was just a lack of releases for the true heads.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, for us just talking so much about the big pilot maybe alludes to the fact that the Pro wasn't enough breadth and width in the releases on IWC at that time. And I think, you know, that's when we'll pick up the chat in the third installment where we talk about Chris Granger-Herr. And, you know, I think if we frame it like he's been left with this catalog from IWC, a lot of people looking for innovation, for changes, and he still needs to keep it commercially viable and for modern collectors.
Yeah.
We'll get into his tenure and what he's done up to date.
One thing, by the way, you said he didn't have breadth. I think maybe there's an argument to go the other way and say he had too much breadth, which was, you remember, the bronze case, is it the Spitfire? You know, there's quite a lot of variations on these things that I have to really rack my brain to think about. I pick them up and go, cool, but then I sort of move on. There's another one, the Darwin or something like that. Yeah, there's just a couple of special editions that I kind of like we're seeing less of now. You know, like that we're just staying quite pure and core.
Yeah, it's a good point. Perhaps my comment about the range is not fair. I guess what I'm trying to say is the range in which people really cared about.
Yeah,
it was such a focus on the big pilot.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed part 2, talking about Georges Kern. Next up, we're going to be talking about Chris Granger-Herr, who's still the CEO today, started in 2018, and we're going to do a deep dive into his tenure. So make sure you're subscribed to get notifications of updates, and we'll be back soon to talk about IWC in the modern era. Thanks for tuning in.